Today I've got Caroline Scowron. Is that how I pronounce it, Caroline? Sorry.
Scourin, you're close.
Scowron. Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show, Caroline.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Can you tell people a little bit about yourself, please?
So, I am from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the United States, and I am a author and public speaker. I'm a huge mental health advocate as well as anti-bullying advocate. I really just want to try to help the future generations feel less alone. So that's pretty much like my main thing.
That's cool. Can we go back to the start then? Can we talk about your kind of journey from, childhood up to what's got you to this point?
Yeah, so, I had an amazing childhood. I have the most incredible, loving family. My sister, my mom, and dad, and I, we always have been very close. But every time I left my house when I was growing up, I always felt like I never fit in. And I really struggled a lot with my self worth, my identity, and really just kind of like learning to love myself. It really kind of took a long time considering I got bullied a lot and it only kind of progressively got worse as I got older. And so that's kind of what started my depression and anxiety. And it just kind of started to be down a little bit of a rabbit hole at that point. I can't hear you now.
Sorry, I'm having issues with this microphone, but hopefully
You're
it'll
good.
work from now on. Um, I don't know what it's like for you in the States, but in the UK, bullying, I don't think it's handled very well. I don't think it's
No.
I think it's all the interventions seem to be too late. And it's already had the impact on the children. I don't know if that's something that you found through your experiences.
Definitely. I mean, I think that, bullying, especially in schools, it's a hard thing to tackle, but I think that they're not doing enough to prevent it, to be honest with you. And I think that it's really going to come down to the voices of the kids that are getting bullied to be like, "Hey, like this is what's happening right now with me, like can you guys help me?" And if the school isn't helping them, of course they're going to be like, "Wait, what? Like why isn't anyone helping me?" So I think that it's going to take that. It's also going to take parents. It's going to just take a lot more voices to really kind of understand that these schools are not doing enough. And more than that, the bullies actually are not getting repercussions for their actions. They're pretty much just getting away with it. And with cyberbullying, they definitely do. And that's what's a major problem. And especially in the US, I don't know about the UK as bad as it is now, but middle schools, high schools, it's really rough for those kids.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough when I went through school that we didn't have social media and stuff at the time. So, you could at least, very least, if you were getting bullied at school, you could go home and get away from it. You're having a break from it. Whereas now it's 24/7, isn't it? There's no escape from it.
No, there's no escape from it. And I think that's the thing of always being connected on their phones is that kids are always, having the internet at the palm of their hands. And so with that, comes them just being able to see what people are saying about them 24/7, which is just so not healthy. I mean, I went to high school whenever the apps were just starting. I mean, that was before TikTok, but it was, Instagram and Twitter and all of that stuff. And, it was a very toxic cycle for me because, you get to see what everyone else is doing or posting. And then if you're not invited or, if you think you're friends with someone and then you're not, it just makes you feel really bad.
Yeah, and it's important that people like you speak up as well, because you've obviously, if you've been through it, you have a
Yeah.
better understanding and you can empathize with it. The kids that are going through that journey, who, a lot of the time don't feel like they can speak up, or if they do, that they're not getting the help and support that they need.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing too, though, is speaking up about bullying or really any mental health issue, anything like that. It takes courage. It takes, it takes full, being like, listen, like I know that I'm not in a good place in my life. I need help. I need someone to help me, whether it's to stop the bullying or whether or not it's someone struggling with mental health issues, they all kind of go hand in hand because they all require you to speak up in order to make a change, in order to make a difference.
Yeah. Were you able to speak up while you were in school? Did you find that was something you were able to do or not?
No, it definitely wasn't. I think that, I was at the age where it was like middle school. So it's like, you didn't want to be a tattletale or whatever. But at the same time, I also really wasn't getting support from my teachers. Um, there was this one teacher in particular where like I got bullied in front of him and he like never tried to do anything. And so that kind of was kind of an issue because it kind of just let it happen and let the boys, torment me and it was like that's not what a teacher's really supposed to do. And I know, a lot of other people, even people I know who are teachers now, it's like, oh, well, if there's something going on, I address it firsthand. I make sure that these kids are, you know, getting what they need.
Yeah. And how that impact, how did it affect you kind of day to day?
I think the biggest impact that bullying had on me was the feeling of what's wrong with me? Why don't people like me? But in reality, it wasn't what's wrong with me. It was the fact that there were these kids that were just clearly never, I don't know if they weren't given enough attention as kids or what, but they decided to end up ganging up on me. And I think that, when you're in that moment, you're not really thinking about it. But, years later and really having a lot of time to reflect and stuff, I do realize and recognize I'm like, a lot of that must have been these bullies were having issues with themselves and they just didn't know how to handle it. And so they took it out on me. And that is definitely what happened for sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is you get the kids who have, obviously going through stuff, or you know essentially take it out on people. Maybe that's kind of how they get treated at home, maybe, or there's
Hmm.
some traumatic events and stuff that's happening at home that um, leads them to behave that way and to single people out and to go after people essentially. And then I think a lot of it is a lot of people, a lot of the other kids are afraid to go against that person, so they kind of join in to be, connected to that person and feel safer, so they are not being the target.
Right, right. It's like, it's keep your friends close, enemies closer kind of thing. And, I think what's really crazy about my experience though is that, I definitely got bullied a lot more by boys than girls in middle school. And today, when I hear stories of kids in middle school, it's like the girls are so mean to each other. And then it gets worse in high school. So I thought I had it bad, but, I hear stories today and I'm like, wow, like, it was not even the half of what it is now.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't sound like a great place to be. And like I say, that fact that you can't get away from it makes it so much worse.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem too with having social media with the bullying. It just amplifies it 10 times worse and it just follows them home. They can't get away from it. And that was the biggest difference when I was in middle school than now is that these kids just can't get away from it. And that's just, it's a problem.
Yeah, sad, right?
Yeah, it is. It definitely is.
Yeah. Um. So obviously you've gone through that experience in school. You've been bullied, etc. How have you managed to kind of rebuild yourself from there? What was your journey like from there?
So, after the bullying, I went to high school and I thought that high school was going to be better considering like I was like, oh, it's a bigger school, there's a lot more people to meet, whatever. But it was not like that at all. And I struggled a lot academically. And that made it really hard too, especially since I developed anxiety and was diagnosed with depression. And I struggled a lot with kind of how to kind of just deal with an everyday situation. And it really just got worse and worse. But it took me a long time to go through these trials and these hard times to really be like, wait, like, okay, why did that happen the way that it did? Or like, why were those girls being mean to you? Or why was it? And then also coming back to the fact that it wasn't me, it was the fact that, like, what was really going on there, because there's clearly something going on with them. Or because no confident, secure person has any intention of bullying or being mean to someone. So you clearly have to be very insecure and very unsure of yourself to be a bully.
Yeah, but once you're being bullied, it's difficult to see that, isn't it? Sometimes because they,
For sure.
especially if there's a few people jumping on it, it's it's really difficult not to start believing the things they've said.
Yeah,
Especially if you're already insecure about certain things, because we all have our insecurities, right? We're all insecure about
right.
certain things, and if they're really digging in on that particular thing, whatever it may be, it just makes it so hard to realize it. I mean, it's took me years to step out and realize that actually, when people are being mean to you, actually, it's not necessarily about you. It's about you know their issues, really.
Yeah.
But
I mean, yeah, for sure. 100%.
yeah, but as a child, it's hard, and you don't necessarily have that thought process, do you? I mean, a lot
No.
of children don't, anyway. At least.
Yeah, your brain's not fully developed till you're like 25. So, when you're in middle school and high school, that's like a very trying time. And so, if you do get bullied or if you do get people being mean to you or just like talking behind your back or whatever, it does make you think that there is something wrong with you. But it takes self reflection after the fact to realize that there was nothing wrong with you and that some people just will literally pick on anyone and everyone just so they don't have to avoid so they can avoid the feelings of how they feel about themselves, honestly.
Yeah, it's easier to point fingers, right, and just
Yeah,
pick out other people's flaws, so you don't have to think about your own.
absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's another
Yeah.
thing too though is it's like flaws are not actually flaws. It's for me like they used to bully me about my nose and so then I started to hate my nose and it took me years later to be like, okay, you know what? That's whatever. Like, I am who I am. I'm confident in who I am. I don't need people to tell me that, that whatever they said about it like years ago, just like learning to like let it go. I think that's the biggest thing too with bullying too, which is really hard is like learning to let things go and really finding a healthy coping mechanism whenever that is happening to you.
Yeah, I think you need a healthy dose of self-awareness, and to be able to love yourself, really, and be at peace with who you are.
For sure.
But I imagine that must be very, very difficult once you've had that bullying and people trying to reinforce negative thought processes over and over again.
Yeah, that's why it really does come down to self-worth and like how you think of yourself and what you think of yourself and not believing what other people are saying if they are saying mean things. And that takes a lot of experience and time to really understand like okay, this isn't me. This isn't my fault. This isn't my problem. Like this is on this person. Like I need to know that I am enough the way that I am and that my nose isn't big or whatever they want to say like and really understand that why are they saying that they're clearly having issues with themselves and honestly I got to a point in my life where I'm like I look back I'm like I feel so bad for you. I feel so bad for you that you think it's better to hurt people than to just be a decent human being and to be kind and I feel bad that you don't know empathy, and then that's kind of really where I got with it is like, I'm like, I actually feel bad for you.
Yeah, they've probably not been shown any empathy in their own life, I imagine.
Probably.
And as kids who you know learn a lot by watching what their parents do or what the people around them do, the environment that they live in. If they've not been shown any empathy themselves, then they're very unlikely to show it to anybody else.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing too, those kids now are becoming so less empathetic because of becoming so desensitized to everything. And I think that empathy is almost something you have to teach some people, unfortunately, and teach people of like, listen, how would you like it if someone did that to you? How would that make you feel? And if you're like, wait, I wouldn't like that, that would feel like crap. Be like, okay, then why am I making someone else feel like that? It's, it all requires really being self aware. And a lot of bullies are not self aware. But if you're a victim of bullying, you end up getting to that point of being self aware because you realize, wait a second, I wouldn't want anyone else to feel this way. So I'm not going to fight fire with fire. I'm going to treat people with respect and kindness. And that's their issue, because it's not your problem.
Yeah. How do you, is that self awareness just something that comes with the territory, or is that something you've had to work on to try and get to that point?
I think it's definitely something I've worked on for sure, but I also think that it's something that comes with like through experiences that you go through. You can see like, oh, like okay, that actually wasn't my fault, or really just reflecting on things. I think self-awareness requires to reflect a lot. And I think that that's something I have developed over time of like, listen, like I need to be aware of, how I'm making people feel. I need to be aware of how I'm making myself feel. I need to be aware of how I'm talking to myself. That all comes with time. And maybe it's happened as I've gotten older, but it really is something that it's like, when you're self aware, you're so much more in tune with yourself. And when you're self aware, you're less like bothered, I guess I would say, because you're just kind of like, okay, well, like that wasn't like, okay, like let it go, move on.
Yeah, I find it quite difficult to, for people because I struggled with it a long time, and it's taken me, I mean, 30 plus years probably to figure out, who I am and be comfortable with myself. And I was fortunate enough; I didn't particularly get bullied in school. I was, had a pretty good journey through school, really. So I was very fortunate in that sense. Um, and I find it really difficult because it took me this long. So I imagine how much harder it must be if you've gone through bullying and you've been put down for a long period of time, and you at an early age feel that anxiety, that depression. It must be really difficult to climb out of that.
For sure. I mean, I struggled with depression for a great deal of my life, high school, moving on to college. It really kind of took me until I was like 22, 23 to realize that like my depression was not going to control me anymore. I think the thing about depression and anxiety is when you get so comfortable being depressed or you're just constantly always anxious, you kind of expect things to just be horrible. You're like, okay, well, this is always how it's going to be. My life is always going to suck. This is how it's always going to be. But I think that, at least for me personally, it took like a car accident for me to realize, like, wait a second, like, let's reframe this here. Let's also understand the fact that we are so lucky to be alive and, going to therapy, taking therapy seriously. That was a big thing of how I started to turn my life around was by taking therapy seriously and by finding healthy coping mechanisms, because I think that's something that I struggled with for a very long time.
Yeah, there's a few things I want to touch on there. I'm going to start with the accident. How bad was the accident? Was that something that really opened your eyes to?
Yeah, so it happened in 2020 and I should have died. I could have gone flying through the windshield. I was in backseat middle. The car was hit, it was totaled, it was a hit and run. They never found the person. It was a truly not only traumatizing but such an eye-opening experience because I realized how lucky I was to be alive, and I realized that right before that car accident happened, I was like, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Like this could literally be the end. Like this could actually be it, and still having nightmares to this day sometimes about it. But the difference now is like I've learned to like work through it and be like, that was a traumatizing event, but it also made you stronger.
Yeah, and from that, that's kind of what triggered you to go to therapy.
That's what triggered me to take therapy seriously. That's a difference.
Okay.
I was
Yeah,
going to
and
therapy for years, but I never took it serious until, you know, pretty much 2020. So it took a long
yeah,
time.
I've discussed this on a few podcasts with people about therapy, and if you're not engaging with it properly, then it's not going to work for you. It takes that level of engagement for you to take it on. Otherwise, it's never going to help you out.
Yeah, and it takes a certain level of vulnerability that you have to be willing to be with your therapist. That's why, you know, a lot of people I've heard have been like, oh, therapy doesn't work, this or that. And I always use the example of like when you're going to buy shoes, if you don't find a pair of shoes that day, are you never going to wear shoes again? It's almost like, you got to find something that's going to fit for you. So, sometimes you have to do trial and error. And I went through a lot of therapists, but I think that now that I have one that I truly love and trust, and like we have a very good, just conversation every time, and really just helps me feel better. I realize that like, okay, this is the person I need to be going to. And I think it just all takes that point where you're like, okay, I feel comfortable talking to this person. I don't feel like I have to lie to them. And that's when you found a really good therapist.
Yeah, because that's another thing, right? People go to therapy, they might go to see one therapist and they go, "Oh, doesn't work." But maybe you just haven't got the right rapport with that person because it's a relationship as well at the end of the day where you're trying to build a
Absolutely.
relationship with them that you're comfortable enough to, to share some really, really hard things.
For sure. I think that's the thing is you have to be like finding someone who you're like saying, okay, I almost trust you. So it's like I feel okay opening up to you. Some people are like, oh, like, therapy, trauma dump. But, I think it takes time to build that type of relationship with a therapist. I mean, I have been with mine now for almost like 7 years. And it took a long time to find one that I was like, okay, this is definitely the person I need to be going to. This is definitely the person who is going to help me. She's going to help me think through things differently than I would have thought through. Reflecting. She's also taught me a lot of self reflection. So maybe that's where I've gotten a lot of self awareness from, was actually therapy.
Yeah, I mean, it just helps you look at things from a different perspective. It helps you, bounce ideas off people, but also it helps. It's a safe environment to talk about things as well because we have all these things going around in our head or things that we bottle up and we keep in boxes inside, and if we don't talk about them, we'll never process them or get through them.
Yeah. Talking about it is important, and being able to communicate and open up, because I always say that when you keep things to yourself, you're like a ticking time bomb, which is exactly what I used to be. I just kind of let things build and build and build and build, not talk about it, not talk about it, lie to my therapist, not say what really was going on, whatever. And then it almost got to the point where in college, I almost try to take my life because I really was at a breaking point. And that is something that's so important to talk about, is talk about your feelings, talk about your emotions, because keeping it to yourself is the most detrimental thing you can do to your own mental health.
Yeah, and we're all terrible for doing it, right? We all keep it in, or even if we do try to talk about it with people, if it's people we are close to or are close to us, a lot of the time we can feel a bit dismissed, or we can feel like that person will just want you to get through it really quickly, whereas maybe it's something you need to sit in and talk about quite a few times. So I think therapy is key if you're having real difficult time.
Yeah, I mean, I think being able to open up and get to the root of something I didn't realize and didn't see until I really started, going to therapy, was that like a lot of why I was the way I am is because of root issues. So really kind of like you kind of really got to dig in and like figure out, why does this trigger me? Why does this make me upset? What is this linking to? And 9 times out of 10, I've found that it was just something that was related to bullying or sorry, childhood trauma, just from like, the way that kids treated me or the way that guys treated me. Like it all linked to something. And I think it was just like really interesting when I was like, okay, this is starting to it's starting to unravel. And I think when you unravel it, you really kind of get to the core of it and you're like, okay, now that I see that this is why this happened, or this is why I am the way I am, how can I better myself moving forward? The only way that you can make a change and you can better your life is to know what's causing the issues beforehand and then figure out a solution from there.
Yeah, you need to understand it first, ultimately. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that understanding of why you're triggered, what's causing the issues, can kind of help you deal with whatever it is that's triggering it, because it could be something unrelated at the time, and you know.
things
not
can
understanding why.
Yeah, things can all just be things that you never would have thought of been, I remember the one time I was talking to my therapist and I realized that something happened, or the way that it kind of all came together was the fact that it was something that happened in like third grade. And so it was like interesting because I was like, wait a second. So, like, that death threat I got in third grade was actually part of the reason why I was so reactive at the age of 21. It's very interesting how things as you're a kid build as you're an adult, and that's why it's so important to deal with your traumas and to talk about them and to not just let them go to the side, because then you come to the point where you're like not knowing how to deal with your emotions properly, and by compartmentalizing everything you're just never going to figure out the root of your issue. And I always just tell everyone, just be open, be honest, be vulnerable. That's how you build the most authentic relationships too, is by being vulnerable and by being willing to open up.
Absolutely. I think if you can't be vulnerable with people, you'll never have that true connection that we all search for, really.
Yeah. I think it's something that just all comes back to like finding genuine connections and finding people who are like-minded like you, and people who support you and want you to do the best you can, not people who are like preying on your downfall, finding really good genuine people to be able to talk to and to be able to just understand and listen to. Those are the best type of relationships, when you can just sit and talk to someone for like hours and they just listen.
Yeah, listening's key because especially now, I think in the modern world, everybody listens just enough to fire something back rather than actually listening to what that person's saying and actually try to understand it and take it in. They just listen enough so they can say what they want to say.
Yeah, no, I do. I think that listening goes in two ways. First, you need to listen to what they're saying and understand it. And then not just say, okay, this is what I think right now. It's like, okay, let me listen to what you have to say, and how can we better you and your mental health moving forward? Like, what can we do to help you? But it really does come down to like listening to what they're saying and not just saying, oh, it'll be fine. Like, it really comes down to really like listening and making sure that you're on the same page pretty much.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even about offering solutions, right? It's about asking more questions and helping that person because that person who's explaining what their issues are is
Definitely. Yeah.
just still searching for answers themselves, aren't they? As well.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, that's very true. Asking questions and not always finding the solution, but just like finding, you know, basically just like digging deeper, and you're getting closer and closer to what really is going on. But I think that that is definitely something that I've learned over the years too, of how important it is to find people who will listen and not just talk. Because I think it's so easy whenever someone's telling us stuff like, oh, well, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. But it's sometimes like, listen to what they're saying and really understand it, because you might be hearing something that you would not have heard if you would have just said, here, this is what I think you should do. If you would actually listen and hear everything, you might hear something that you're like, oh, okay, that actually kind of makes sense. And let's ask more questions about that particular thing.
Yeah, sometimes it's from a place of love, right? Where people just want to help you, so they're trying to give you a solution rather than actually listen. But sometimes you don't need a solution; you just need to
You just need
to
to talk.
listen. Yeah, you need to get it out, and just sometimes you just need to get it off your chest.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's a really important thing, is being able to learn how to take things out of your just from bundling it up, take things out of that and start talking and being open and finding the right people for that, whether that's a therapist or, building authentic, genuine relationships. I think it all kind of, goes together in a way.
Yeah, for people who might be hesitant still to seek out a therapist or you know maybe practice some mindfulness or spirituality, wherever it may be that could potentially help them, what kind of advice would you give those people who are hesitant and struggling?
I was once you. I get it. I understand the just hesitancy to be like, oh, therapy or this or that, or like, why is anyone gonna like want to hear this or whatever. But I also understand that I have such a different perspective now. I think the main thing I would say is just be open to different ways that you can heal. If that's not therapy for you, or if you are against therapy, then like for me, another therapy thing I would say is like working out. For me, working out is a huge, therapy relief, and it's a great thing to do for my mental health. If you're not going to go to therapy, at least try something that's going to help give you peace at mind, and something that's going to help bring you just to like a calming state. But I also think that don't be afraid to try a couple therapists and see which one works for you. But don't go into it with, I'm going to keep everything to myself and I'm going to be as vague as possible. Because I did that, and that's just not helpful at all. They can't help you because you're just not being honest. You're being so not even you're just not being transparent at all. And they're just like, we can't, like, how can I help you if I don't really know what's going on, or if I don't really know why this is happening? So that would be probably the biggest thing I would say.
It's like going to the gym and not working out, right? If you go to the therapist and you don't open up.
Right, exactly. Just like sitting there and, not working out, and just looking around at people and being like, oh, they look fit, I want to be fit. But it's like you got to put in the work in order to get to that place too.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem. A lot of people go to the therapist think, oh, they're supposed to just magically fix everything, where actually you need to put the work in. They're there to just help and facilitate that, aren't they?
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to put in the work. I think that's something that I didn't really anticipate was going to be as much of a factor on helping myself as much as it was. I used to get worksheets and stuff from my therapist, and I'd roll my eyes and I'd be like, I'm throwing this away. Like, I don't need this. And now I look back and I'm like, well, no, it was actually helpful because it was like things about mindfulness and things about dialectical behavior therapy and, you know, DBT and just like figuring out like healthy coping. And so stuff that I might have thought was like ridiculous to like be like, oh my gosh, okay, yeah, this is gonna really help me. But really just give it a chance, because I think that that's all they're trying to do, is they're really just being like, hey, can you give me a chance for me to help you? Because if you don't give them a chance, they're not going to be able to help you. And you can go to therapy for 10,000 years. But if you're not willing to open up, if you're not willing to be vulnerable, if you're not willing to dig into your trauma to help yourself better your life in the future, it doesn't work. And that's the honest truth.
Yeah, that's very, very true, and that's from my experience as well. That's kind of how I've seen it. With, I've seen a lot of people succeed with therapy and a lot of people fail with therapy, but it always seems to be it only works if you engage.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Buying into it.
Uh,
I always say buying in is the secret to it. You just got to buy in. You got to be like, I want to get better. I want to help myself better my life. I don't want to feel like this forever. And that's when you kind of have to force yourself to be like, okay, I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this, but I need to. And by opening up, you're going to help yourself so much more. I promise. Because I totally did that and it changed my life.
Yeah, the gym has been a saving grace for me. So you were saying that you use the gym as well. That is what I do for my mental health mostly. That's probably the thing that
Yeah.
helps me the most. I started doing it for the physical side, but it's more for my mental health than anything else now, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I it's crazy that, you'll just be having like a long day or whatever, and then you go to the gym, and yes, you're exhausted after, but you also feel so good. And I just, the endorphins and all this stuff, like I love how I feel after. I'll be like, oh, I don't want to go to the gym, but then I'll go and I'll be like, okay, it feels so good, like peace at mind, like at a calm state. And I think that that's a really important thing to develop as a younger kid, which I didn't really know at the time that that would have been such an important thing. But as like a kid, teenager, young adult, like what can I do to kind of like calm my mind? What can I do to like help myself? And things that I can do by myself, because I think it's so important. In order to heal, you have to spend a lot of alone time to not only reflect, but really to just be comfortable with yourself again. I was so insecure for so long that going to therapy was like, it was horrible because I was alone with my thoughts and the therapist. And once you realize, like, oh, wait a second, like, this is actually something that I need to do. I need to find something I can do. If I'm not going to go to the gym, am I going to go to yoga? If I'm not going to go to yoga, am I going to go for a walk? Like, what am I going to do that's physical activity? Because I think physical activity is so crucial in your healing journey. And if you are trying to have a better mental state like every day, it really does come down to working out. And it's not like working out is going to fix everything, but working out and being active, just it puts this new peace of mind that you get it when you do it a lot. You'll understand when you do it a lot.
For me, it brings that bit of peace to my mind, gives me a bit of quiet, and because my mind is always constantly working, so
Same,
that
yeah.
brings me that level of peace, which then enables me to kind of take a step back and reflect, and and see what's actually going on, and why my mind is going so crazy half the time.
Yeah, I like to say that my brain just never sleeps. So I'm always thinking about something. I'm always, I'm thinking about the next thing or something, or like, what am I going to do later or this or that. But sometimes it's nice to just really be at like a calm state and like just focus on, why you're at the gym at the moment and not focusing on all the million other things you have to do, but just being there and being present. And I think that's the other thing too, is being present at the gym is so important because you just do as much as you can, because you'll be surprised how far you can push yourself. I'm not just saying all in one day, like the first time you go to the gym, do everything. But over time, if you build it up, just push yourself more, because you'll feel good after and you'll be like, I can do this. And it's a confidence booster as well.
Yeah, and I find that it gives you something to focus on as well, especially if you have like a training plan or a program. Is something to actually focus on, so you're thinking about the next one and the next one, and it kind of helps as well in that way.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It really does. It makes such a difference.
Yeah, and you talk about your mind being constantly active. Same, I have the same issue. How do you find sleep? Does your mind shut down for sleep, or is it really difficult to get to sleep?
So I I actually have a learning disability, which I probably should have said earlier, but it's called nonverbal learning disability. And basically, like, you're highly verbal, but you struggle with like science, math, school, like you internalize things a lot. You sometimes are like ruminating. And so that's kind of where my mind sometimes can go sometimes. And so I have to like really kind of like train myself to be like, we're not doing this right now. Like right now, like you're going to bed, like put on like some white noise, or cuddle with your cat, like just do something that's just like putting your mind out of all the other things and focus on that one thing. And getting to bed is actually something that I have been able to do a lot easier recently. But I think it also is just comes to the point where I just like really try to just like calm my mind and be like, okay, we'll deal with this tomorrow, like not right now.
Yeah, do you find that white noise and stuff helps?
I love it. I think the white noise is great. I sometimes will do even like rain sounds or like whatever, but it is so therapeutic too. It like just helps me like go to bed immediately.
Yeah, I've used the rain sounds quite a lot, and I've tried that. They call it brown noise. I don't know the difference, to be honest, but I've tried that as well. I don't know if you heard of that one.
I don't think I've ever heard of that one, but is it the same?
It's it's strange. It's different to white noise, but it kind of does work. But I find the rain is the best one for me. That helps me
Yeah.
the most.
I do love the rain. I think it's just so calming, and, it calms my anxiety, just like everything. Like it's helpful to find something that like will help you go to bed, because the worst thing you can do at night, which is something I used to do all the time in high school, and which is probably why like I never slept, was because I was always on my phone. And when I'm on my phone in the dark in bed, like I'm not going to go to bed. So I always try to put my phone down and then just like not look at it again until the morning.
Yeah, I'm still terrible for that. I'm on my phone up until the moment I need to go to sleep, but it's not
Yeah.
great, and then I have a terrible sleep.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
That's how it is.
So, sorry, you talked about your learning disability. So was it NVLD?
NVLD, yes.
Okay, I've never actually heard of that one. Could you tell me a little bit more about it?
So basically, I worked really, really hard in school. And my sophomore year, I found out I had this learning disability just because everything finally caught up with me. I had a bunch of tutors for different things, but I wasn't doing well in certain classes and things weren't adding up because I was working really hard. So then when I took this test to really kind of figure out why I wasn't doing well in school. And that's kind of what told us that I had my nonverbal learning disability, which is also something where, you struggle with conceptual skills a little bit. So you struggle with spatial awareness. And so for me, like that sometimes can include like parallel parking. And like sometimes I'll literally just have like my best friends do it because I'm like, I can't. I just and they know. So it's like not like it's like, oh, can you do it? Like, they get it. But really just kind of learning to control your thoughts and not get so caught up in the past. Something that I do a lot and something that I've really had to work on too is like not letting myself get caught up in the past and kind of like letting things go. Like even with the car accident, as angry as I was that, they never found the person, I also had to let it go because it was starting to affect my mental health. And so I was like, you know what? What's done is done. Karma will come or sure, like whatever. I might not see it, but I just need to let this go because holding on to this is just gonna bring me back to a bad state and it's not healthy for me. So, even things like that, just learning how to kind of think about my own self and my own thought process, it all kind of, ties together. So, it's not just something that is in school, but it's also something that affects me in life. So, that's the difference about nonverbal learning disability than like, ADD, ADHD, dyslexia. That pretty much affects you a lot more in school rather than outside of it. But I've had to kind of really figure out and navigate, my own life and just focus on how I can stop myself from ruminating or just going down a rabbit hole. And that's probably like the biggest thing, and how I will say it affects me the most to this day is by just like not letting myself like go down this like bad rabbit hole for a second.
Did getting a diagnosis help you to like understand it and feel a bit more confident about things? Or how did that getting diagnosed impact you initially?
Well, if I'm being honest, when I first found out, I freaked out because I was like, what? I have a disability. I was already in remedial math at the time that I found out I had this learning disability. I was like, does this make me dumber than the other kids? Does this mean that like people are going to make fun of me? What does this mean for my like, college? What does this mean for all of this? And that ended up turning me to go to boarding school. And I went to boarding school for kids with learning disabilities. And I'm glad I did that because it gave me a chance at college. And had I not I'm sorry, done that, I probably wouldn't have made it to college. So I was kind of lucky that I was able to figure that out my sophomore year. And as hard as it was at first, and as angry as I was at first, I'm 27 now. I found out when I was 16. It's kind of interesting to know more of why I am the way I am. And I don't take it as a bad thing anymore. I just take it as like it's a part of me. It's not all of me.
Yeah, there's still a lot of misunderstanding with learning disabilities, and I don't think
Absolutely.
there's enough education. Like I said, I've never heard of NVLD until we've spoken. So there's obviously not enough education out there about not only about the different types of learning disability, but how it impacts people and what people around them can do. There's I don't know if it's different in the States, but in the UK, there's very little kind of support and help around it, other than to the actual person who's experiencing the difficulties. Really,
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have like IOPs, or like they have things where you can like get extended time and stuff like that. But really, as far as learning disability, like education, there isn't that much knowledge about it. Learning or nonverbal learning disability is not in the DSM-5, which is like all of these lists of disabilities. It's technically not a disability, which is it should be because it is a huge part of a lot of kids have it, don't even know. It's something that not everyone actually is diagnosed with. You might not even know you have it, but it totally made sense, and it really does give me peace of mind knowing that, like, okay, like, this is why this is happening. Okay, this is why you're overthinking this right now. Like, your LD is getting in the way. Like, just stop. Or like, if I'm about to like pick a fight with my sister or something, and then I'm like, wait a second, like, stop. Like, this is you. Like, literally, just stop. And so it just kind of all goes back to really, again, being self-aware and knowing when I'm doing certain things. All my best friends knew from day one that I had this learning disability, and I was like, this is why I am the way I am, and why I do this, and sometimes why I'll get, like this or whatever. And they all have been super understanding and super supportive, and I couldn't ask for better friends.
Yeah, that's nice because it's important that the people around you know and understand as well. Really, not just you, because it's good for you to have an understanding, but it's
Yeah.
important for the people around you to have understanding as well, so that there's no kind of miscommunication or there's no falling out because they think you're being mean or something. Something's happening that they don't like. But if they can
Right.
understand why it's happening, they'll have much more empathy and a compassion really for it.
Yeah, they definitely have a lot of empathy and compassion for it, and, like, there have been times where I've, like, said something, or, like, I've been like, "Wait, I feel like this," or whatever, and then they'll be like, "Wait, that's not how it is at all," or, like, I'll interpret something, and they'll be like, "That's not what I meant at all," and, like, they're very aware of how things are gonna, like, affect me, and I think that that's a real blessing to find friends like that, because they don't pick fights if they know that I'm doing something, like, not even on purpose, but, like, they won't, like, be like, "Oh, why'd you say that?" or, like, whatever. It's like, oh, like, they get it. And I also try to, like, explain to them more about, like, what it is and things like that, and more facts I learn about it, just so, like, we can all be more educated, and so it can just, like, better all of us.
Yeah. Has it affected your kind of communication and relationships throughout your life?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I think a big thing about NVLD, which I didn't realize that until more recent, was you do get very attached to certain people. So, if there's a change or something happens in your life and they're no longer like in it, like, when high school and college, your friends are changing and stuff. And it affected me a lot more than I thought it would. But it also was something that I kind of like have kind of learned how to like let go, and, instead of being like, "Oh my gosh, why are they leaving my life?" be like, learn to be like, if people are going to walk out of your life, like, let them. Like, that's not for you to worry about, because you have people who would go to the ends of the earth for you right now. And so I'm not going to worry about those who are going to like leave me or betray me or whatever, because I do have my strong close knit group of friends now.
Yeah, and ultimately, there's some things are out of our control, aren't they? And we need to accept because if we try to control everything, we'll end up falling down.
Oh yeah.
Ultimately, we need to focus on the things we can control, and not spread ourselves too thin as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing is, like, with life and everything, it's like, you can't control how people are going to treat you, but you can control how you react. So, not everyone's going to like you, and that's fine. And that's something I kind of had to come to terms with at some point, of being like, listen, like, you're going to have some people who don't like you, whether it's because they're jealous of you or whether it's because they just have their own issue. Like, if they're going to be rude or people are going to be rude, let them. Like, I think, something that I've also started doing a lot is the let them theory, which is basically just like letting things go, being like, oh, they want to do that, let them. I'm not invited here, let them not invite me. If I'm not doing that, like, I think it's just like a very healthy way of thinking, because it's like, oh, like, if people are going to be assholes, let them. I even have focused on, social media a little bit more recently too. And like, I'll get hate comments here and there, and I'll be like, you know what, just let them, like, screw it. Like, okay, like, your opinion is so relevant. Like, no one cares. So I think really coming to terms with being okay that, there are going to be your people in life, and then there's going to be those people who just are preying on your downfall. And those are the people you just have to say, screw you. I'm not like focusing on you. I'm not putting my energy on you, and moving on, because, there's so many more good people in life than bad, but there's always a rotten apple everywhere.
Yeah, especially on the internet, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Absolutely. And in
Yes.
life too, like it's everywhere, you know? It's just it's everywhere. You're going to have people, you know, in your work, you're going to have people in life, you're going to have people just all around you who, you know, you're going to have some bad people, but I think it's just really important to not focus on that, and it's really important to just like not put your energy towards that because it's exhausting and it really just ruins your mental health and just hurts you more. So I just have kind of learned to be like, you know what? Like, if anyone's going to have anything rude to say or they want to talk behind my back, then let them. And I think the best way of living life is just not giving a shit what other people say and just focusing on your people and your family and your animals because animals are therapy too.
Absolutely. Animals are the best, right?
Oh, absolutely. I have my cat Lily, and she is the cutest thing ever. And I absolutely adore her. She's just like the best thing to come home to after like every day. Like I'll walk in the door, she'll be like, meow. Like it's just like it's just so nice to like have a companion that's like always there for you. So I will say if you are struggling, I will say getting a pet. It definitely helps because you're responsible for something else and it helps you a lot. I mean, it definitely helped me a lot for sure.
Yeah, I actually listened to a podcast the other day. I can't remember which one it was, to be honest, but they were talking about how there's been studies and actually having pets and animals, and having that cute, cuddly time with animals actually reduces stress. Like it's proven to reduce your cortisol levels.
Oh wow. Okay, I did not know that, but maybe that makes sense because like if I'll be at like nighttime and Lily will come and cuddle and I'll be like, and then I'll just like maybe that's also why sometimes I fall asleep is because she's like right there, and then it's like it's like my child honestly. But I really do recommend getting a animal if you are in a rough time because animals can be like a saving grace. It's like you don't know it until you have them, and then you're like, "Wait, yeah, this changed my life for the better."
Yeah, sometimes it's about having, like I say, something else to focus on, something else to look after, but also it's that love and interaction as well that you get.
Yeah, that unconditional love, they're always there. They're just they're innocent little, creatures, and you just got to take care of them and love them. And, you know, I get my cat way too many cat toys and they're all over my apartment everywhere, but I'm like, "You know what? It's fine. They're all for her." So, whenever I vacuum, I have to like pick them up so I don't like accidentally vacuum them up because that's happened before and I'm like, "Sorry, Lily, I didn't mean to ruin your toy."
I love it. Well, so you use the gym, you've got your cat. Obviously, you still good at therapy. Are there any kind of day-to-day practices that you use to kind of help yourself as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think that gratitude is one of the biggest things that I've tried to implement in my life really every single day. And by that, for me, it just kind of started with being like, I'm thankful for this and not going to worry about what I don't have. But I also think that, like, journaling can help a lot too. Writing down your thoughts, writing down your feelings. I still, write a lot and, journal my feelings and really kind of just like where I'm at in a certain point. And it kind of also helps you too, because you can like look back and see like, oh, I've come this far, like, and it makes you feel good. But yeah, gratitude is a really big one. And that one, you don't even have to write it down. You can just be like, I'm thankful for this or this. And I'm thankful that I am, healthy. Just things that you start to see, you're like, wait, you see it at a different perspective. And I think gratitude really does help with perspective for sure. And then the other thing I would say too is really finding something that you enjoy and like makes you happy. Like for me, like not only writing, but I also love singing and I love writing music. And so even if I don't even make like a full song out of it, it's just like a very therapeutic thing for me. So coping healthily for me is definitely writing. That's like the number one thing.
So, talking about writing, you've wrote a book, right?
Yes. So I published my first book in 2021. It's called Unbreakable. It's about my journey, my own struggles with mental health and adversity, but it also shows a lot of, just how many things are common in life and how, like, statistically, there's a lot of people going through very similar things. So if you're feeling alone, it's really, I hope that it makes people feel less alone, and I hope that it makes people feel heard and seen, because I really do know what it's like to be at the worst part of your life and wanting to give up. But also, I feel like my book was such a healing thing for me, because just writing down everything and just like letting it go, it was like the most therapeutic thing I could have ever done for myself.
How did you find writing it? Did you actually do you find it difficult, or did you have to like take breaks? Because obviously, if you're sharing, vulnerability and that stuff, that's been really difficult for you to cope with. It
Oh,
must have been
definitely.
must have been difficult to get through that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I did it during COVID. So that was like a time where everyone kind of was like, secluded. But, once the coffee shops were open, I would go to the coffee shops all the time, and I'd go for like 3 or 4 hours, and I would go every day. And I wouldn't just, yeah, it's not like you just like write it down in one sitting. Like it takes a while. It takes, you know, pulling stories together. It takes, figuring out what you want your message to be in each chapter and stuff like that. But I really do think that, being able to write a book in a year was it's one of my proudest accomplishments for sure.
Yeah, but it's not an easy feat to write a book,
No,
and
no,
especially no,
no.
and especially when you're talking about highly personal things. It's completely
Yeah.
different if you're doing fiction or even maybe non-fiction that's not personal. It's completely different than actually kind of digging into your soul almost and pouring it out for people and knowing that other people are going to read that and you're going to put that message out there.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's why you go through so many edits. That's why you have friends and family, and then they're like, "Do you really want that in there?" And you're like, Maybe you're right." And it's. I also, a lot of people say years later, like, "Oh, I wish I wouldn't have put this in my book or this in my book." But everything I put in my book is so to the T who I am and authentic to me. There's nothing that I wish I would have said or not said. I feel like I said everything I could have, and, I'm glad I took some of the stuff out that I did, because, I think that, there were certain stories, or there were certain people, guys mainly, who like didn't deserve to be in the book. And I'm so glad I took them out. I was like, yeah, no, this is not happening. I'm not going to look back years later and be like, oh yeah, why would I actually write about this asshole? So, you go through this whole process, and it's so rewarding though, because you just like, you get different perspectives from like your family, and they have this thing called beta readers. So you have like a couple people who are going to look at your first looks of chapters and stuff like that. And I'm very proud of it, and it's definitely something that has taught me a lot. It's taught me a lot about myself, and I hope I can write another book in the future for sure. But I definitely wrote this book because I was very inspired. But we'll see if I get inspired again.
Out of curiosity, what inspired you? What was it that drove you to really want to do that?
It was my car accident, actually. My 2020 car accident. It made me realize that I could have died. I also realized that I almost took my life freshman year of college, and I knew that that wasn't a coincidence. And I knew that that meant something. And I was also so grateful for where I was at my life. I was so thankful for my family, my friends, my pets. Like I was so thankful for everything that I had at that point, that I realized I was doing the best I ever had been. And I also realized that it was the worst a lot of people had been at that point. And so I thought that if I'm doing amazing right now and other people aren't, why don't I share my story and finally use my voice? Because this can help someone who is silently struggling, someone who isn't ready to speak up. And that's really what Unbreakable is meant to do, is if you're not ready to speak up, to still know that you're heard.
Yeah, and I imagine there's a lot of people out there who, have no one to turn to or, feel that they have no one to turn to, even if they do essentially. So, being able to turn to a book in private is probably a really helpful resource. And, listening to you on a podcast and stuff like that is going to be helpful because you can do that in private without
Right.
necessarily exposing that vulnerability until you're ready.
No, for sure. I think that's the thing is, everyone's at a different point in their healing journey, and I get it. I was once at a point where I was not ready to use my voice, and I just almost like see it as a way of like, I want to give back to those who are struggling now that I'm doing so well, because I was once in your shoes and I get it. but I also understand that life is such a beautiful thing and that it does get better, and that even if it's not tomorrow or a couple weeks from now or a couple months from now, it will get better. It will start turning around, but you have to fight and you have to hold on, because life is something that is so precious. And that car accident really taught me that. I could have died at any second. And so to be able to be alive and have my second chance at life, that's why I wrote the book. And that's really what I can hope people can see from it is, you know, this is meant to help you if you're struggling in those silent times that I was. And I wish I had a book like this when I was silently struggling. But now I'm like, if I can help one person, then I did exactly what I wanted to do.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Where can people find your book, Carolyn, if they want to
So you
purchase
can
it?
actually find it on carolynsophia.com, which is my website. So it's just Carolyn Sophia, no space, and then .com. You can also find it on Amazon, but type in Carolyn Sophia, not Unbreakable, because people have told me they've gotten weird things when they type in Unbreakable. So I'm like, okay. So that is where you can get it right now. I'm definitely trying to get it more in stores and stuff too. So if anyone in the UK wants to, sell my book, let me know. Like, I would love it. I would love to come to UK. I've always wanted to go.
I'll make sure I pop the links in the show notes for you as well.
Oh,
Um,
perfect.
I'm definitely interested in looking up Unbreakable as well now on Amazon just to see what comes up.
Yeah, like sometimes people have told me they've gotten like wine glasses. Other times there's like I guess there was like another movie Unbreakable like way back when. So you really just got to type in the specifics.
Yeah, no worries. Um, right. What part is so this is a question I wanted to ask that I noted down before the show that I wanted to ask you. So sorry if it's a little bit off topic, but I
Oh, no,
just
you're
wanted
fine.
to ask you. So what's one part of yourself that you're still learning to accept or understand?
Wow, what a deep question. I think the biggest thing that I still struggle to understand about myself is why I sometimes self-doubt, because I realize that I am a lot smarter than I give myself credit for. And sometimes I struggle with, self-doubt, or like, should I have said this? Should I have done this? This, like that. But that's something I'm really working on, and like not like giving myself grace, letting myself move on, be like, you know what, like things happen, nothing's perfect. You just got to keep going. But I would say, yeah, I would love to change that thought process sometimes, and really just sometimes even the self deprecation, because I'm not going to lie to you. I still have days where I'm like, I don't feel good about myself, or, there will be days where I don't feel like my best self. And, that's also why what I started to do too, but it's still a journey, is to say in the mirror every day, like, I'm beautiful. And then say one thing I love about myself. And it's not even in a cocky way. It's just like a way to like build your confidence and to be like, I love my eyes. Okay, great. You are amazing the way you are. Like, just really kind of owning who I am.
Yeah, that self doubt. I think we all suffer from it. I think,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, we all have that negative bias. I think where we're all, we're our own worst critic, right? I think
For sure. For
but
sure.
we're definitely harder on ourselves than anybody else can be. Um, and it's difficult, and we got to try and find that compassion and kindness for ourselves first. But especially in the UK, it's a very negative culture in the UK. Everybody's very negative about everything. Whereas I find the States are a bit better. I think people still struggle, but they
Really? I
generally
would say opposite.
no. In the States, I think you have the whole American dream kind of mindset where people do believe they can achieve things and they go and do stuff. Whereas in the UK, it's a lot of they like everybody to just remain where they are and not change. Nobody likes anybody to kind of get too big for their boots.
Well, if they ever need a public speaker, I'm also a public speaker, so I'll go to the UK and talk some motivation into everyone. That's also on my website as well too. If you do need a speaker, I speak about my own journey, and I just speak about some really exciting things about getting through and making it through the impossible, and showing you that you can get through anything, and no matter where you are in your life right now, you can always change it.
Yeah, absolutely. What's probably the thing that you're most proud of about your journey and how far you've come already?
I think I would say 2 things. One, I would say is the fact of being able to have kids come up to you when you're a public speaker and be like, "That helped me so much," or "I went through this when I was this old," or "I had an attempt and your story really resonated with me. Thank you. Like, you made me realize I was worth it. I'm enough." And I think the other thing I would say that I'm really proud of too is just how my confidence has increased. I could always say my book or speaking or whatever, but it's really just about those like connections and those kids that come up to you. That's number one. And two is definitely just how confident I am in myself. And that's something I never thought I'd get to because I used to have people doubt me all the time. And I used to have people tell me like, I'm not good enough. And you're not this, you're not that. And it's really kind of nice to be able to prove everyone wrong, even yourself. So, well, not everyone, because like my family's like my biggest like cheerleaders for sure. Um, and as long as my best friends too. So I'm also theirs. So that's really important to find people that you can cheer on and that will cheer you on and who want you to succeed just as much as you want them to succeed.
Yeah. If right, if you could ask your future self one question, what would that be?
Future self. Well, I would be like, will we ever get to do a uh, a speaking tour or a book tour? I would love to be able to do one of those. Just be on the road, just speak all over. That would be amazing. Or even being able to speak about my book all over. That would also be amazing. But either way, I'm so grateful with where I am in my life right now. So I don't even feel like there's something I like need in the future because I never thought I'd get this far. And I know that it can only go up from here. And so I really hope that it inspires someone else to keep going or chase after their dream because people can tell you you can't, but you have to believe you can. And your life will change, your mindset will change. Believe in yourself, or no one else will.
Absolutely. That self-belief is so important. And
Absolutely.
I think that's where we need to start with everything, really.
Yes, for sure.
So obviously you've got your book, you do your public speaking. I'll make sure I've got the links and stuff in the show notes. Aside from those that you already got, what does the future hold for Carolyn?
I think, going on a lot more podcasts. I am going to be on a show that's going to be on soon, which I can't say much about yet, but it will be on Apple TV, I think. But that will be really cool. And also, I'm just going to continue to reach out to as many schools, universities, podcasts, just really everyone. And hope that they can let me share my story on their platform because in every audience, whether it's a podcast audience or a speaking audience, I just want to make sure that I touch one person. And if I do that, then I know I did everything I wanted to do.
I'm sure you will with your message and your story. I'm sure that you will definitely help a lot of people.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, I'm going to bring the podcast into land here. So, do you have any kind of final thoughts for people, or final message for people who are having their own challenges or facing that self doubt or mental health issues or even feeling like an outsider?
The first thing I would say, if you're struggling right now, if you're listening to this right now and you're like, oh my gosh, I am struggling so much, I'm really depressed, I'm really anxious, go get help. And don't be ashamed getting help because when you go and get help, it's actually a very courageous thing you can do for yourself because you're acknowledging the first step of like, I need to better myself. How can I do that? Whether or not that's going to therapy, whether or not that's going to intensive outpatient therapy. I mean, I did that whatever it is, make sure that you're reaching out for help because your life is so, so precious. And I cannot stress that enough. And I really think that being able to be vulnerable and open up and stuff, you will discover things about yourself you didn't know. And it's very therapeutic, it's very healing. But the other thing I would say too is, I know that life can be hard sometimes, and I know that there are good and bad to life, But at the end of the day, you have to focus on the good, and you have to find even one or two people who can just like be your support team. That's really important as well, whether or not that's a therapist, a guidance counselor, you know, psychiatrist, a friend, a family member, whatever it is. Reach out and talk to them and have them be your support system, because that is really important too when you're struggling. But mostly, I just really hope that people understand that they can get through anything. And no matter what you're going through or what you've been through, you have so much ahead of you, and your life is so worth living. And the best is yet to come, because you are unbreakable and nothing can break you.
Absolutely amazing. Carolyn, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. It's been a
Thank
blast.
you.
Thanks so much. Take care.